The first rays of sunlight pierced the dense canopy of ancient redwoods and towering oaks, casting long, shifting shadows across the meticulously designed enclosure at the Willow Creek Great Ape Sanctuary. Located deep within the tranquil, verdant foothills of California, the sanctuary was a haven where nature and cutting-edge science converged. Here lived Coco, a magnificent western lowland gorilla, renowned not just for her striking intelligence, but for her astonishing fluency in American Sign Language, ASL. For Dr. Eleanor Vance, a primatologist whose life was a testament to dedication, Coco was more than a research subject. She was a profound connection, a shared language, and the living embodiment of a lifelong quest to understand the minds of our closest relatives. Together they had spent years meticulously unraveling the intricate tapestry of Coco's cognitive abilities, revealing an emotional depth and intellectual capacity that consistently astonished the scientific community. This particular morning carried an unusual stillness, the air thick and heavy with a humid warmth that promised the kind of oppressive heat common to Californian summers. Eleanor, hunched over her tablet, was meticulously reviewing the latest behavioral data, the low hum of the sanctuary's ventilation system a steady backdrop. Across the vast, naturalistic habitat, Coco sat amidst a scattering of wooden blocks, her usually playful demeanor replaced by a quiet, almost contemplative intensity. She moved with a slow deliberation, her large, powerful hands occasionally pushing a block without true purpose, her gaze often fixed on nothing in particular. Suddenly Coco paused. Her hands, thick with dark fur, hovered motionless in the air. Eleanor, acutely attuned to every nuance of Coco's expressive gestures, instinctively looked up, her pencil pausing mid-note. Coco's large, intelligent eyes met Eleanor's, then darted towards the soft earth beneath her, before she slowly, with an almost agonizing deliberateness, began to sign. The first few movements were hesitant, but then they gained a stark clarity. Human. Pain. A jolt, cold and sharp, shot through Eleanor. Coco had on rare occasions expressed abstract concepts, happiness, sadness, even complex ideas like good or bad. But human pain was a phrase that snagged at her mind, a jarring combination she hadn't anticipated. Her voice, usually calm and measured, held a slight tremor. Pain, Coco. Where is the pain? Coco's eyelids fluttered, closing for a brief moment, as if sifting through an internal landscape, accessing a deep, perhaps unsettling memory. When her eyes opened, they held a flicker of something akin to sorrow. Her hands moved again, this time with a more urgent intensity, repeating the initial concept and adding to it. Human makes pain. Nature. Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs, a rapid, frantic rhythm. A cold dread settled in her stomach, mingling with a surge of scientific exhilaration. Coco had never voiced such a direct critique, such a sweeping observation about humanity's broader impact. It wasn't a comment on a specific person or a single interaction. It was as if she was articulating a universal truth, a profound understanding that transcended her confined existence within the sanctuary. Coco's revelation hung in the humid air, a dense, inexplicable fog that seemed to thicken with each passing second. Eleanor felt an overwhelming certainty that something profound had just been unveiled, that her understanding of Coco, and perhaps of humanity itself, was about to take an unforeseen and potentially disquieting turn. That whispered utterance, deceptively simple, yet overwhelmingly powerful, promised to irrevocably change everything. If you're intrigued by what Coco might have perceived, don't miss the next chapters. Subscribe to the channel to follow this fascinating story. And remember, this is a work of fiction. The days that followed Coco's startling declaration were steeped in a palpable tension that hung heavy over the Willow Creek Sanctuary. Coco's words, "Human makes nature pain," became an incessant echo in Eleanor's mind, a refrain she couldn't escape. She found herself caught in a mental tug-of-war, striving to rationalize the statement. Perhaps Coco had merely linked something she'd seen in a nature documentary or overheard during a staff conversation. Yet, the profound depth in Coco's gaze, the deliberate weight behind each executed sign, carried an emotional gravitas Eleanor found impossible to dismiss. The Californian weather itself seemed to mirror Eleanor's internal disquiet. Uncharacteristically, brilliant sunny mornings would abruptly give way to bruised gunmetal grey afternoons, bringing with them fierce, unpredictable winds. These gusts carried the acrid, telltale scent of distant wildfires, a constant harrowing reminder of the state's environmental vulnerability and the fragile balance of its ecosystems. Coco, usually vibrant and curious, became notably more reclusive. She spent hours gazing at the roiling clouds, or rhythmically tapping her knuckles against the hard-packed earth of her enclosure, a mournful, resonant sound that seemed to hum with a quiet despair. Dr. Ben Carter, Eleanor's esteemed colleague and a leading expert in animal behavior, was the first to notice the profound shift. "She's different, isn't she, Eleanor?" he remarked one blustery afternoon as they stood observing Coco from a respectful distance. Eleanor merely nodded, her eyes never leaving the gorilla's solemn form. "She made an observation, Ben, about us, about humanity and the impact we're having." Ben, a pragmatic and analytical scientist, tried to offer a comforting, rational explanation. "Coco is brilliant, no doubt, but she's still an animal. Perhaps she misinterpreted something or linked unrelated concepts." But Eleanor knew, with a certainty that transcended logic, that it was far more than that. Coco was expressing a deeply felt truth, a profound insight that was clearly affecting her on a fundamental level. The irrefutable proof of this came a few afternoons later, during one of their routine communication sessions. Coco was unusually agitated, her massive body swaying back and forth with a restless energy Eleanor rarely witnessed. Her eyes, usually clear and bright, were clouded with an emotion that Eleanor struggled to decipher, a mixture of frustration, sadness, and something akin to quiet desperation. "What's wrong, Coco?" Eleanor signed, her voice a gentle, reassuring murmur. Coco stopped her swaying, her heavy body settling. She turned, her large, intelligent eyes locking onto Eleanor's. Slowly, with an agonizing clarity that sent shivers down Eleanor's spine, she began to sign. Each movement was deliberate, weighted with profound meaning, human, breaks, nature, cries. And then, the phrase that stole Eleanor's breath, freezing her heart in her chest, human, doesn't understand. The air around them seemed to thin, the silence in the enclosure becoming deafening. Coco wasn't merely making an observation, she was articulating a lament, a deep, resonant sorrow for humanity's profound disconnection from the natural world. For Eleanor, those simple signs were a heart-wrenching cry of pain, not from Coco but from the very essence of nature itself, echoing through the gorilla's eloquent voice and movements. Coco's perception was terrifyingly lucid, an undeniable truth that resonated deeply with the escalating environmental crises plaguing California and the wider world. Eleanor felt an overwhelming weight settle on her chest. It was as if Coco, with her innate innocence and instinctive wisdom, possessed the ability to see the gaping wound that humanity had inflicted upon the planet, a wound that so many refused to acknowledge or simply couldn't comprehend. The profound connection Coco felt with nature was palpable, and her visible distress was a direct reflection of a fundamental fracture that Eleanor now saw with devastatingly new eyes. Coco's poignant message about human-inflicted pain and humanity's baffling lack of understanding resonated within Eleanor, an insistent, recurring echo that refused to fade. Coco's sorrow had, in a profound way, become her own, and the primatologist felt an urgent, growing imperative to act. She needed to honor the gorilla's extraordinary perception, to translate Coco's truth into tangible change. The sprawling concrete jungle of Los Angeles, a mere few hours' drive away with its relentless traffic and towering grey structures, now seemed a stark and jarring contrast to the pristine serenity of the sanctuary and the innate wisdom of nature that Coco so powerfully embodied. Eleanor made a resolute decision. Coco's message had to be shared, not as a mere scientific curiosity, a fascinating anecdote for academic papers, but as an urgent alarm, a heartfelt plea to the world. She meticulously organized a small, intimate press conference at the sanctuary, carefully inviting a select group of respected journalists and influential environmentalists known for their integrity and reach. The day of the event was unusually somber, a fine, persistent drizzle dampening the leaves of the trees and settling a contemplative hush over the entire environment, making it feel almost sacred. As Eleanor stepped onto the makeshift podium, the weight of her immense responsibility settled upon her shoulders. Ben, standing steadfastly by her side, offered a silent yet powerfully reassuring presence. She began to speak about Coco, her voice initially soft but gaining strength as she detailed the gorilla's remarkable intelligence, her unparalleled capacity for communication. And then, her voice thick with emotion, Eleanor revealed the gorilla's stark, unvarnished words. Human makes nature pain, human breaks, nature cries, human doesn't understand. A profound, stunned silence fell over the small gathering. A few journalists began to whisper, their faces etched with a mixture of disbelief and awe. Others simply stared, trying to process the gravity of what they had just heard. Eleanor knew intellectually that many would initially dismiss Coco's words as mere sensationalism, a projection of human emotions onto an animal. But she pressed on, her voice imbued with a fierce passion and unwavering conviction. She spoke eloquently about the desperate need for humanity to reconnect with the natural world, to truly listen to the unspoken truths that nature was constantly whispering, and how Coco, a humble gorilla, had paradoxically emerged as the most eloquent and powerful voice of that vital message. Eleanor's report, fueled by Coco's profound message, swiftly went viral. The story of Coco and her vision of humanity's impact spread like wildfire across news outlets and social media platforms, igniting fervent debates and sparking passionate discussions. While some cynically dismissed it as mere anthropomorphism or journalistic hyperbole, an overwhelming number of people were deeply moved by the stark simplicity and profound depth of Coco's message. Spontaneously, individuals from across the globe began to make pilgrimages to the sanctuary, not just to catch a glimpse of Coco, but to quietly reflect on their own ecological footprint and their place within the intricate web of life. Volunteers, inspired by the gorilla's poignant words, began to offer their time and skills to local conservation projects. Schools, captivated by the narrative, swiftly implemented new environmental education programs, directly inspired by Coco's remarkable story. Observing Coco playing in her habitat once more, her movements now imbued with a gentle grace and renewed vibrancy, Eleanor felt a fragile yet powerful flicker of hope. The gorilla, who had once seemed to bear the entire weight of the world's sorrow on her broad shoulders, now displayed unmistakable signs of lightness, a quiet peace. One afternoon, Coco approached the reinforced glass barrier of her enclosure, and with a slow, deliberate motion, made a new sign to Eleanor. Human tries. Eleanor's face broke into a radiant smile, tears streaming unbidden down her cheeks. Coco was no longer merely lamenting, she was offering a profound spark of hope, a fragile promise of change. The gorilla, with her innate wisdom and her uncanny ability to perceive humanity for what it truly was, flawed and imperfect, yet undeniably capable of transformation, had become a beacon of understanding. Coco's journey wasn't simply about groundbreaking interspecies communication. It was about humanity's profound rediscovery of empathy, its acceptance of collective responsibility, and ultimately, the reclamation of its own inherent humanity. The formidable obstacles that humanity had unwittingly created, the deep disconnection from nature, the rampant destruction of ecosystems, remained vast and daunting. Yet Coco's powerful voice, echoing in countless open hearts and minds, had undeniably sown the vital seeds of change. The outpouring of support Eleanor received, the global mobilization of individuals striving for a better future, all reinforced the profound idea that, together, humanity could indeed begin the arduous but essential process of healing the pain that Coco had so clearly and heartbreakingly perceived. If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories. And remember, this narrative is a work of fiction.